Chapter 879. The sword pierced through his eyebrows like a stone falling into the sea. Yi Xian's body trembled slightly and then stopped moving. In the distance, Qin Tian was stunned. Soon, Qin Tian's expression changed because he found that he had lost contact with the brush. Qin Tian stared at Yi Xian. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Yi Xian greedily took a deep breath and smiled. Dean Qin Tian, thank you. Qin Tian looked at Yi Xian with a sharp gaze. How did you do it? He knew that his punishment heaven brush must have fallen into Yi Xian's hands. Yi Xian grinned. Why don't you guess? Qin Tian was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. The person disappeared and the sword light appeared. Yi Xian's sword was extremely fast. Could be said that he had raised his sword speed to the extreme. Moreover, he was using the immeasurable sword and the word spirit of the extinguished character on the tip of the sword. Therefore, the power of this sword was extremely powerful. If it was outside, this sword was enough to split the space. However, this was the book realm. With the strength of Yi Xian and Qin Tian, they couldn't break the world inside. Opposite Yi Xian, Qin Tian looked at Yi Xian. When the sword was several zhang away from him, he suddenly disappeared. Yi Xian's sword pierced through the air. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Lian Qian suddenly said, he left. Yi Xian's face darkened. How could he leave? Lian Qian said, after all, he used to control the book realm. He knows the power and boundaries of the book realm very well. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, in other words, he is outside now? Lian Qian said, yes. Yi Xian was silent. As if she knew what Yi Xian was thinking, Lian Qian continued, with this book realm, you don't need to be afraid of him. If he wants to fight, just take him in. Of course, it will be difficult for you to kill him with your current strength. Yi Xian nodded. I know. If he wanted to kill Qin Tian, he wouldn't stand a chance unless he used the power of his bloodline. And once he used the power of his bloodline, he couldn't control himself. This was the most depressing part for him. Yi Xian was about to leave when Lian Qian suddenly said, wait a moment. You should first master this brush before you leave. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he asked, how long? He was still worried about Shaoqi and the others. Lian Qian said, with the help of this brush, it will be very fast. Yi Xian nodded. Then let's begin. In less than an hour, Yi Xian had truly gained control of the heaven punishment brush. This pen had 3 forms: attack, defense, and copy. It could be said that if his sword wasn't a celestial sword, he wouldn't be able to break through the defense of this brush. The copy ability was quite terrifying. It could copy some extremely powerful divine abilities and sword techniques. Of course, he wasn't thinking about its might, but that it could be used to frame others. Currently, he had the executing heaven sword, soul suppressing sword, myriad dimensional mirror, heaven punishment brush, and book world. It was also because of these treasures that he was able to fight Qin Tian, especially the book world. If it wasn't for the book world suppressing Qin Tian's realm, he wouldn't be able to fight Qin Tian even if he had these treasures. The book world was the foundation for him to fight above his realm. After leaving the book world, Yi Xian glanced at the surroundings. Qin Tian was no longer there. As if he thought of something, Yi Xian asked, Miss Lian Qian, are there many treasures in the Worldwide Academy? Lian Qian said, a lot. They should be in the hands of Qin Tian. Yi Xian nodded and asked again, are they familiar with you? Lian Qian said, many of them are familiar with me. However, there are also some that I'm not familiar with. Not only are they unfamiliar with me, but they've also fought with me before. Of course, they can't beat me because my big sister is very powerful. Yi Xian, Lian Qian said again, he still has something on him. The next time you meet him, you have to be careful of him taking it out. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly looked up. In the distance, several powerful auras were rushing over. They were Xin Xinghe, Fu Wenzong, and the other experts. Xin Xinghe appeared in front of Yi Xian. Seeing that Yi Xian was fine, he instantly heaved a sigh of relief. As if thinking of something, he hurriedly asked, have you fought with Qin Tian? Yi Xian nodded. Xin Xinghe glanced at Yi Xian. He's dead? Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. How could that be? It's just that he couldn't do anything to me, so he left. Xin Xinghe took a deep look at Yi Xian. We still underestimated your strength. He was very clear about Qin Tian's strength. Logically speaking, he was not someone that Yi Xian could fight against. However, Yi Xian was still alive. Xin Xinghe collected his thoughts and looked at Yi Xian. Little Grandmaster, don't take such risks next time. Yi Xian nodded. All right. Xin Xinghe shook his head and smiled. You're just brushing me off. Yi Xian smiled. Old Shin, let's not talk about this for now. Let's save my friends first. Qin Shinghe nodded. Let's go. Yi Xian rode on his flying sword. At this moment, Qin Shinghe pointed his finger and an orange talisman was stuck on Yi Xian's sword. In an instant, Yi Xian's flying sword's speed increased explosively. Yi Xian was shocked. His speed had increased by at least 30%. This was too terrifying. One had to admit that the rune Dao of the fifth dimension was really strong. Soon, the group disappeared into the vast horizon. Somewhere above the sea of clouds, Shaoqi, Lian Wanli, and Enlanxiu were standing on a cloud. In front of the three of them was an old man. This old man was Lu Yong. Around the four of them was a net that seemed to be weaved by lightning. This net covered the space around the four of them. Outside this net stood an old man. This old man was wearing a white robe and had his hands behind his back. Behind him were 9 people. These 9 people were very young, no more than 20 years old. However, the aura emitted from these people was extremely powerful. Martial Arts Pavilion. These were the students of the Martial Arts Pavilion. They could be said to be the elites of the elites in Wuyuan. And the old man leading them was the Martial Arts Pavilion's pavilion master, Wu Chuan. This was an expert who had been famous for many years. In the distance, Lian Wanli, who was beside Shaoqi, suddenly said, "Are we just going to wait like this?" Lu Yong nodded. "Wait for the people from my sect to come." Lian Wanli said, "It's not like we can't beat them." Lu Yong smiled bitterly. "Young lady, you might not know, but do you see the lightning net around us? This net is a huge array. Once you move, it will immediately activate and attract countless lightning to descend. At that time, those people outside will immediately make their move. We will be surrounded by enemies." Lian Wanli said, "But it is not good for us to wait like this." Lu Yong nodded. "I know. I have already received the news. Our Fu Wenzong experts will arrive in 15 minutes at most." Lian Wanli looked at Shaoqi. "How strong are those people?" Shaoqi glanced at Wu Chuan and the others. After a short moment of silence, she said, "I can only fight that old man." Lian Wanli looked at Enlanxiu. "Can the two of us defeat the others?" Enlanxiu glanced at the students of the Martial Arts Pavilion. "No problem." Lu Yong was speechless. Right at this moment, Qin Tian suddenly appeared in front of Wu Chuan. Lu Yong's face instantly sank when he saw Qin Tian. Qin Tian glanced at Lu Yong and the others before he said, "Attack." As soon as he finished speaking, Wu Chuan, who stood behind him, suddenly opened his palm, and then a bolt of lightning suddenly flew out. Meanwhile, the lightning net suddenly trembled. In the next moment, countless bolts of lightning that were thick like pillars descended from the sky. Lu Yong's expression changed when he witnessed this scene. He suddenly soared into the sky and waved his right hand. An orange talisman suddenly flew out, and then a flaming shield appeared above him in the next moment. Meanwhile, the bolts of lightning descended. Bang! The flaming shield instantly cracked apart. Meanwhile, Lu Yong waved his right hand again, and an orange talisman shot into the sky. In an instant, the flaming shield was transformed into a sea of flames. Meanwhile, Qin Tian suddenly gazed at Shaoqi's group of 3. In the next moment, he suddenly took a step forward. Meanwhile, Shaoqi, who was seated cross-legged in midair, suddenly raised her head, and then she took a step forward and slashed with her sword. Bang! Her sword slashed down, and Qin Tian was forced to stop in front of Shaoqi. But right at this moment, Qin Tian suddenly smashed his left fist forward. His fist was like a collapsing mountain, and it carried an oppressive force that seemed capable of obliterating the world. At this moment, Qin Tian's cultivation hadn't been suppressed, and he was able to exert 100% of his strength. Shaoqi's expression remained unchanged as she raised her sword to block it. Bang! Shaoqi's sword wasn't able to block the force of Qin Tian's punch, and her entire body was blasted flying. Qin Tian was just about to attack again when a spear tore through the sky from the side. The spear was like a thunderclap, and it was swift to the point it couldn't be seen by the eye. Qin Tian frowned slightly, and then he turned around and tapped with his finger. This tap directly struck the tip of the spear. Bang! The spear shook violently, and Enlanxiu was blasted flying along with her spear. But right at this moment, a dragon roar resounded. Qin Tian turned around and saw a saber descending straight towards his head, and there was the soul of an azure dragon on the saber. Qin Tian took a step back, and he suddenly smashed his fist forward when the saber arrived around 1.5 m away from his head. Bang! The soul of the azure dragon exploded apart, and Qin Tian was blasted flying along with his saber. But right at this moment, a sword and a spear suddenly appeared behind him. Qin Tian turned around and pushed his arms forward. Rumble! The space in the surroundings trembled, and Xiaoqi and Enlancio retreated repeatedly. However, Qin Tian had retreated by over 10 m as well. After Qin Tian stopped, his expression became extremely gloomy, and he didn't conceal his killing intent at all as he gazed at Enlancio and the others. Monstrous geniuses. He hadn't expected that there would be so many monstrous geniuses besides Yi Xian in the fourth dimension. Moreover, these three people were on the same side as Yi Xian. Once they were allowed to grow. When he thought up to here, the killing intent in Qin Tian's eyes grew denser. After a moment of silence, Qin Tian suddenly said, "Attack!" As soon as he finished speaking, he charged forward while Wu Chuan and the others followed behind him. Obviously he intended to kill Xiaoqi and the others here. In the distance, Xiaoqi was just about to attack when she suddenly looked to her right, and a ray of light tore through the sky towards her. Qin Tian stopped, turned around and saw Yi Xian. In next to no time, Yi Xian appeared not too far away from Qin Tian. Qin Tian gazed at Yi Xian and was about to speak. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly looked at Xiaoqi. "Can you hold him back?" Xiaoqi fell silent for a moment and then she said, "How long?" Yi Xian raised a finger. 15 minutes. I'll kill everyone in 15 minutes. Everyone was speechless. As soon as she finished speaking, she transformed into a ray of white light and vanished. Yi Xian nodded and walked through the stone door with Lian Qianli. After passing through the stone door, there was only darkness, and an oppressive feeling assaulted their faces. Yi Xian opened his palm and a moonstone flew out. But at this moment, a ray of sword light suddenly slashed the moonstone. Bang! The moonstone directly exploded. Yi Xian frowned slightly. "This is?" Lian Qian said, "The sword spirit of this place. There was a sword here in the past, the blind swordsman's sword, and the sword spirit has always been guarding this place. Master wanted to take it away but it was unwilling. You have to be careful, the sword spirit of this sword is extremely powerful, and you can't underestimate it." Yi Xian nodded, and he glanced at the surroundings before walking towards the depths of the cave. At this moment, a ray of sword light suddenly cut through the air in front of him. Yi Xian blocked it with his sword. Bang! A powerful force instantly blasted Yi Xian out of the cave, and Lian Qianli was also blasted out together with him. Outside the cave, Yi Xian frowned slightly. Was this sword really that powerful? Without thinking too much, Yi Xian was about to make a move when Lian Qian suddenly appeared in front of the cave. She looked into the cave and asked, "Do you still remember me?" At this moment, the faint sound of a sword humming came from inside the cave. Lian Qian turned to look at Yi Xian. "Let's go." After saying that, she led Yi Xian and Lian Qianli into the cave. The cave was still pitch black, but after walking for about 15 minutes, the three of them heard the gurgling sound of a stream. Yi Xian looked into the distance. There was an exit in the distance, and from this exit, he saw a waterfall. After exiting the cave, their field of vision suddenly widened. In front of them was a small waterfall, and below the waterfall was a pool of water. All around them was a sea of flowers. Yi Xian looked at the bottom of the waterfall. On the pool of water, there was a middle-aged man with his eyes covered by a black cloth. The middle-aged man was dressed very simply in simple cotton clothes. From his appearance, there was nothing special about him, and he looked no different from an ordinary person. At this moment, Yi Xian and Lian Qianli suddenly turned their heads to look. Not far away from the flowering shrubs on the right, a woman wearing a cotton dress walked out. The woman held a bouquet of flowers in her hand, and her body emitted a domineering aura. Sword spirit. After this woman came out, she looked at Lian Qian and said, "Long time no see." Lian Qian nodded. "Yes, it has been a long time." The woman walked to the side of the pool and placed the bouquet of flowers in her hand into the pool. Then she asked softly, "Where is your master?" Lian Qian shook her head. "He disappeared." The woman frowned and looked at Lian Qian. "In this world no one can kill him." Lian Qian said softly, "He disappeared. But he wasn't killed by anyone. As for where he went, even I don't know. It's like he evaporated into thin air." The woman fell silent for a moment before she said, "He's a very extraordinary person." Lian Qian smiled and said, "Your master is very powerful as well." The woman looked at the middle-aged man in the middle of the pool and said softly, "During Master's era, after Master became famous, he had never tasted defeat. But if you compare him to your master, he's still lacking. Your master is the strongest person I've ever met." Lian Qian shook her head. "He was." The woman turned to look at Lian Qian and asked, "What do you mean?" Lian Qian said softly, I met a very strong woman in the fourth dimension, so strong that she's unreasonable. The woman frowned slightly. Stronger than your master? Lien Qian said in a low voice, I don't know. I only know that if she fought Master might not be able to defeat her. Right, she's also a swordsman. Swordsman. The woman's brows raised slightly when she heard Lien Qian. She's a swordsman? Lien Qian nodded, yes. The woman looked straight at Lien Qian. You mean she's stronger than my master? Lien Qian glanced at the middle-aged man in the pool not far away. Your master is the strongest swordsman I've ever met in the fifth dimension, but that woman should be stronger than your master. Ridiculous. The woman's expression suddenly became cold. If you say that your master is stronger than my master, I'll admit it. But I don't believe that there's a swordsman in this world who's stronger than my master in the way of the sword. Absolutely impossible. Lien Qian shook her head. You should go out and take a look. She knew that the master of the sword spirit in front of her was very strong. How could a person who could create the infinite sword not be strong? But that woman was even stronger. That woman was so strong that she was unreasonable. At this time, the woman not far away suddenly said in a cold voice, in my heart, all the swordsmen in this world added together can't even compare to a single hair on my master's head. At this time, the sound of a sword suddenly rang out from within Yi Xian's body. The next moment, the sword of the plain-dressed woman suddenly flew out. Its speed was extremely fast and like a sudden clap of thunder, it instantly slashed towards the woman. At this time, the female sword spirit suddenly stood up, her eyes as cold as ice, impudent. As her voice fell, a powerful sword force erupted from her body. In a courtyard somewhere in the Worldwide Academy, a middle-aged man suddenly stood up. He was the strategist who had gone to the four-dimensional universe. And he was in charge of looking for Yi Ling. The strategist looked at the old man who suddenly appeared in front of him. Still no news about Yi Ling? The old man shook his head. There's no news about the four-dimensional universe. The strategist said in a deep voice, what about the five-dimensional universe? The old man said, our people have already gone out to look for him. Not only that, I've also asked the strategist sect for help. The strategist sect. The strategist nodded slightly. With their help, it should be easy to find Yi Ling. The old man nodded. They said they already have some clues. Let's get ready to capture him. The strategist immediately said, let's go. As soon as he finished speaking, the two of them disappeared from the scene. P.S. I've already bought a small motorcycle. I'm going to replace it with 4 wheels in 2 years. I have a 2-story old house. The decoration is average, but it's livable. With a car and a house, I feel that there's nothing more to pursue in life. I have a weak question. At my age, this is already considered amazing, right? Lin Xiaoshu said in a deep voice, that world prison pagoda is in Yi Xian's hands and it has already recognized him as its master. Lu Shidi said softly, then take it back. Lin Xiaoshu looked at Lu Shidi. Lu Shidi smiled and said, that world prison pagoda originally belongs to our worldwide academy. It is only right and proper for us to take it back, isn't it? Lin Xiaoshu said in a deep voice, he will not easily hand it over to us. Moreover, from what I know, that pagoda does not seem to be in his hands right now. Lu Shidi smiled, that pagoda has already recognized him as its master. As long as he is willing, that pagoda can return to his hands at any time. Lin Xiaoshu was silent. Not far away, Qin Tian looked at Lu Shidi and Lin Xiaoshu. At this moment he suddenly understood. These people did not come back for the Worldwide Academy. Their real goal was the Worldwide Library. It was teacher's treasury. Thinking of this, Qin Tian shook his head and smiled. At this moment he remembered the words of the prophet. The most unpredictable thing in the world is the human heart. The most volatile thing in the world is also the human heart. At this moment, Qin Tian suddenly felt disheartened. Without thinking much, Qin Tian turned and left. In the distance, Lin Xiaoshu looked at Qin Tian. Lu Shidi said softly, this time he did such a stupid thing. Letting him live is already giving teacher face back then. After saying this he looked at Lin Xiaoshu, go inform all the experts of the Worldwide Academy outside. Tell them that our Worldwide Academy has reached a moment of life and death. Lin Xiaoshu frowned, will they come back? Lu Shidi nodded, they will. Because they won't just watch as the Myriad Dimension Academy declines. Lin Xiaoshu nodded and turned to leave. Lu Shidi turned and looked not far away. That was where the Worldwide Library was located. Inside there were treasures left behind by the prophet. After a moment of silence, Lu Shidi turned and left. After the news of the Shura Empress being wanted by the Worldwide Academy, the entire Worldwide Academy became a laughing stock. The Shura Empress. It could be said that no one wanted to provoke the Shura Empress. Who didn't want to avoid this place? However, the Worldwide Academy actually wanted to arrest the Shura Empress. Wasn't they tired of living? Somewhere in the clouds, Yi Xian was currently fighting with the Sword Spirit Woman. On his back, he carried a giant sword and in his hand was a light sword. When fighting with the Sword Spirit Woman, when he used the light sword, his sword was like thunder and as fast as lightning. When he switched to the heavy sword, his style changed abruptly. Under his sword, it was as heavy as 1,000 caddies, splitting the heavens and splitting the earth. When the Sword Spirit stopped, she looked at Qin Yiming, and at this moment, there was a trace of seriousness in her eyes. This person in front of her had crushed her without even drawing his saber. She wasn't a match for him. Very strong. At this moment, Qin Yiming suddenly said, "You aren't the person I want to kill. Tell the Yi Xian to come out." The Sword Spirit was about to speak, but at this moment Yi Xian walked out from not too far away. When she saw Yi Xian, the Sword Spirit said in a low voice, "This person is very strong." Yi Xian nodded and he looked at the distant Qin Yiming. At this moment, Lian Qian's voice suddenly resounded in his mind, "It's the Saber Monarch. This person is extremely strong and you aren't a match for him." Not a match for him. Yi Xian's face sank. "Miss Lian Qian, this is too much of a blow to me." Lian Qian said in a low voice, "You really aren't a match for him." Yi Xian looked at Qin Yiming and said softly, "Even if I'm not a match for him, I still have to fight." Lian Qian was silent. At this moment, Qin Yiming looked at Yi Xian. He sized up Yi Xian and slightly nodded. No wonder Qin Tian was helpless. "Not bad. Come, draw your sword." Draw his sword. Yi Xian looked at Qin Yiming. He opened his palm and the book world appeared in his hand. At this moment, Qin Yiming suddenly said, "Don't use this." As soon as he finished speaking, his realm was directly suppressed to the universe realm. This realm was the same as Yi Xian's current realm, and even lower than Qin Tian's realm. Yi Xian was silent. The other party was very confident. At this moment, Lian Qian said, "Be careful." Yi Xian nodded and he looked at Qin Yiming. He suddenly disappeared and the next moment, a sword slashed at Qin Yiming. Qin Yiming took a step back with his right foot. This step was very slow as if he was taking a stroll. However, it was this step that allowed Yi Xian's sword to slash at thin air. Yi Xian's sword slashed at thin air, but he didn't stop. He leaped up, and the sword in his hand stabbed forward as fast as lightning. Opposite Yi Xian, Qin Yiming moved sideways, and Yi Xian's sword slashed at thin air again. However, at this moment Yi Xian's sword suddenly flew out. Immeasurable sword. With regards to this sword, Yi Xian was very confident, because the person in front of him was too arrogant. And the opponent's arrogance was his chance. Therefore, after 2 consecutive failures, he directly used immeasurable sword for the third sword. However, he was dumbfounded when he unleashed the attack. Oh. This chapter is not finished, please continue to the next page. In the distance, Qin Yiming was still standing there holding a blade in his hand, and this blade was blocking a sword. It was blocked. Yi Xian looked at Qin Yiming. Although his expression was calm, his heart was in turmoil. Qin Yiming said softly, "Your sword is not bad. Whether it is the timing, speed or power, they are all top-notch." Chapter 888. Opposite Yi Xian, Qin Yiming was silent. Seeing Qin Yiming's silence, Yi Xian said, "Senior brother Qin." At this time, Qin Yiming suddenly said, "Why did you kill my students?" Yi Xian said, "Qin Tian and the others wanted to kill me. In order to protect myself, I could only kill." Qin Yiming shook his head. "You are a flowery person with no truth." Yi Xian said, "But Xiao Ta recognized me as his master, didn't he?" Qin Yiming nodded, "I know." As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian, "Take 1 strike from me. If you don't die after 1 strike, I'll do another." Yi Xian. Qin Yiming placed his left hand on the hilt of the saber behind his waist. He stepped forward and a saber intent enveloped Yi Xian. Yi Xian was about to speak when Lian Qian suddenly said, "Run! Run!" Yi Xian looked at Qin Yiming and shook his head. He knew that if he ran now, it would become a thorn in his heart, a thorn that could never be removed. Moreover, he believed that he couldn't escape. Even with the immeasurable sword, he couldn't escape. Moreover, he didn't think about running. Wasn't it just taking 2 strikes? Who was afraid of who? Yi Xian said, "Can I use any method?" Qin Yiming nodded, "Yes." Yi Xian said with a smile, "Come on." Qin Yiming nodded, drew his saber and slashed. It was a very casual Dao drawing slash. However, Yi Xian's expression changed drastically in an instant. Not only Yi Xian, but the sword spirit's expression also turned grave at this moment. She couldn't take this strike. Could Yi Xian take it? The sword spirit looked at Yi Xian. At this time, a 7-colored talisman suddenly flew out from between Yi Xian's eyebrows. World-breaking talisman. Facing Qin Yiming, Yi Xian didn't dare to hold back. He directly used the 7-colored talisman that Fu Wenzong had given him. The moment the talisman appeared, it suddenly turned into a sword tip and disappeared. Break the world. Boom. Space suddenly split apart because it wasn't able to endure the might of the talisman at all. Boom. Along with an explosion, the sound of shattering resounded. After a short moment, a talisman floated down from above Yi Xian. It was the 7-colored talisman. At this moment, the 7-colored talisman had already lost its luster. Damaged. Fortunately, he managed to block Chen Yiming's saber. Yi Xian put away the 7-colored talisman and looked at Chen Yiming. Chen Yiming nodded, as expected of a talisman drawn by him. It is indeed powerful. No wonder Master regarded him so highly in the past. As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian. Take another strike from me. This time I won't hold back. As soon as he finished speaking, he took a step forward, and then the saber in his hand suddenly flew forward. It was a very slow strike, and it didn't carry any saber energy or glow. It was just a very simple strike. On the other hand, Yi Xian's countenance had turned pale at this moment. In the next moment he suddenly retracted his gaze and looked down. There, 2 celestial corpses had been sent flying. The one who had attacked them was not Yi Xian but a little girl. Xiaoqi. Xiaoqi looked at the other 2 celestial corpses. She pointed with her finger and a ray of sword light slashed out. Boom. The ray of sword light slashed one of the celestial corpses. The celestial corpses retreated rapidly with a deep sword wound on their bodies. Seeing that something had happened to Xiaoqi, Xin Xinghe immediately heaved a sigh of relief. He turned to look at Lu Yong who was beside him. Don't use the talismans on these corpses. Use them on the experts from the Worldwide Academy. Also, tell everyone not to hold back. Use the talismans to smash them to death. Lu Yong nodded. He turned to look at the surroundings and shouted angrily, don't hold back, smash them. As soon as he finished speaking, countless talismans flew into the sky from within Fu Wenzong's body. These talismans were all orange in color. It could be said that only Fu Wenzong would be able to take out such a large amount of talismans. Other sects, even the Worldwide Academy, would not use orange talismans like this. It was simply a waste. Only Fu Wenzong would dare to do this. Countless orange talismans flew into the sky. Their power was simply terrifying. In the sky, Lu Shidi's expression also became gloomy at this moment. This was because the experts from Fu Wenzong and the people brought by Yan Tian were being forced to retreat. The orange talismans alone were not particularly terrifying, but if so many of them were gathered together, it would be truly frightening. In the sky, explosions sounded continuously. The entire sky was filled with either wind or thunder. If it wasn't thunder, then it was fire. In any case, all kinds of chaotic energy gathered together, forming a huge hodgepodge. Lu Shidi looked around and frowned. Where was this Yi Xian? Actually, he had always been on guard against Yi Xian. This was because he knew that Yi Xian was extremely good at concealment and assassination. Therefore, he had not dared to let the true experts from the Worldwide Academy attack. Lin Xiaoshu was also secretly waiting for an opportunity. As long as Yi Xian appeared, all the forces would instantly focus on Yi Xian. However, Yi Xian did not appear. What was going on? Lu Shidi's right hand gripped the flute tightly. He felt that something was wrong. At this moment, not far away, Yan Tian suddenly said angrily, "Brother Lu, why aren't you letting the experts from the Worldwide Academy attack?" At this moment, more than 50 of the god corpses that he brought with him had already fallen. Although the 4 super god corpses were not affected by the talismans, they were being blocked by Xiaoqi alone. If this went on, he would suffer heavy losses. At this moment, Lu Shidi suddenly said, "Brother Yan, as far as I know, you still have a few more blood corpses." Hearing this, Yan Tian narrowed his eyes and a cold light flickered in his eyes. "Brother Lu, what's wrong? We're attacking Fu Wenzong together, but you don't want to do anything?" Lu Shidi shook his head. "Of course not, Brother Yan. The most terrifying thing about Fu Wenzong right now isn't the Xin Xinghe or that little girl with the sword. It's the Yi Xian. If we don't guard against him, we'll pay a terrible price." Yan Tian said in a low voice, "Lu Shidi, I'm not going to argue with you. I only have one question. Are your people going to attack or not? If not, the old man will turn around and leave right now. Lu Shidi frowned. Brother Yen, don't you know how terrifying Yi Xian is? Yen Tian said fiercely, I only know that my people are dying one after another. Lu Shidi, are you trying to let all my people die so that you can take advantage of the situation? Lu Shidi was about to speak when Yen Tian suddenly roared furiously, Are you going to attack or not? Lu Shidi glanced at Yen Tian and said, Attack. As soon as he finished speaking, a few old men suddenly appeared behind him and they charged down. Even though there were only 4 of them, their strengths were extremely formidable, and they directly destroyed a huge expanse of talisman energy. Coupled with Yen Tian's super god corpses, they seemed to be on the verge of a counterattack. On the other hand, Lu Shidi grew even more vigilant. He didn't dare underestimate Yi Xian because the Worldwide Academy had paid a terrible price for underestimating Yi Xian. Moreover, he knew that Yi Xian was extremely skilled in concealment and assassination. Yi Xian didn't draw his sword, but once he did, his enemies would definitely die. However, Yi Xian still hadn't appeared. Below, Xin Xinghe and the others were still madly activating the orange talismans. These orange talismans were like paper. Under the situation where Xin Xinghe and the others were madly activating the orange talismans, Yen Tian's side was once again at a disadvantage. Yen Tian looked at Lu Shidi and was about to speak. Right at this moment, the space in front of Lu Shidi suddenly trembled. In the next moment, his expression changed greatly. He's gone to the academy. Not good, his target is the worldwide bookstore. Let's go back to the academy. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and directly disappeared into the horizon. Chapter 891. At that moment, Lu Shidi was shocked. He finally knew why Yi Xian didn't appear. It wasn't that Yi Xian didn't appear but that he had gone to the Worldwide Academy. Now that there was no one at the Worldwide Academy who could stop Yi Xian. More importantly, the Worldwide Book Room was at the Worldwide Academy. If Yi Xian had the key to the prison tower, he might be able to open the Worldwide Book Room. Once it fell into Yi Xian's hands, Lu Shidi didn't dare to think about it. At that moment, all the Worldwide Academy experts rushed back to the Worldwide Academy. Yen Tian, on the other hand, was dumbfounded. They ran just like that? Below, Seven suddenly said, Leave them here. The moment she said this, she tapped the ground and turned into a sword light that charged into the sky. When he saw that, Yen Tian's expression changed. Retreat. Very quickly, everyone retreated. Fu Wenzong naturally wouldn't give up this chance and chased after them. One had to say that Fu Wenzong's fighting was really interesting. He just smashed talismans like crazy. He was just so rich. However, Yen Tian and the others fled really quickly and Fu Wenzong and the others weren't able to stop all of them. In the sky, Lu Yong suddenly said, We can't chase them. Head to the Worldwide Academy. When she heard Lu Yong's words, Seven stopped. Lu Yong said, Little Ancestor has headed to the Worldwide Academy and is in danger. We have to rush to the Worldwide Academy. Seven nodded, Let's go. The moment she said this, she turned into a sword light and disappeared into the horizon. Lu Yong suddenly said, Bring all the talismans. Take out all that Fu Wenzong has accumulated. If Little Ancestor is in danger, then blow up the Worldwide Academy. Very quickly, all the experts from Fu Wenzong rushed to the Worldwide Academy. The entire sect was out. At that moment, numerous people were shocked. Fu Wenzong was risking his life. Worldwide Academy. Under Lian Qian's instructions, Yi Xian quietly arrived at the Worldwide Academy. After he entered a grand hall, he walked along the secret Dao Yi path in the grand hall. He used the immeasurable sword, so no one noticed him along the way. However, when he reached a door at the end of the secret passage, a mirror on the wall suddenly shone on him. Yi Xian's expression immediately changed. He knew that he had been discovered. Yi Xian casually waved his hand and put the mirror away. Then he sped up and quickly passed through the door. Not far behind the door sat an old man. The old man wore a loose robe and had a long beard. He supported himself with a walking stick and just sat there quietly without any signs of life. On either side of him were rows of bookshelves. On the bookshelves were all sorts of ancient texts. Behind the old man was a door of light. Above the door of light was the seal of a tower. Yi Xian glanced at it. It was the same seal as the one in the prison pagoda. Clearly, behind this door was the legendary world-dimensional bookhouse. Then, who was this old man in front of him? Yi Xian asked in his heart. Miss Lian Qian? Lian Qian said in a deep voice, I don't know this person. Yi Xian glanced at the old man. Do you think he will hit me? Lian Qian said, You can try. Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. Boom! An explosion suddenly sounded. The next moment Yi Xian returned to his original position. And the old man was still sitting there. Where he stood, Yi Xian's expression turned ugly. This old man's strength was unfathomable. At this moment, Lian Chen suddenly said, "Retreat." Without any hesitation, Yi Xian turned and left. Because he had been discovered. He knew that if he stayed here he would definitely die when the experts from the Worldwide Academy rushed back. He couldn't be greedy. And the old man didn't chase after him. Soon Yi Xian arrived outside. At this moment he sensed countless powerful auras in the distant sky. Yi Xian didn't hesitate and was about to flee. At this moment, an angry shout suddenly resounded from above the clouds. "Where do you think you're going?" As soon as the voice finished speaking, an ancient book suddenly flew down from the sky. The next moment, a resplendent white light erupted from the ancient book. This white light enveloped the entire Worldwide Academy and shone on where Yi Xian was. And the space he was in started to tremble violently. At the same time, dozens of powerful auras enveloped him. Yi Xian's expression sank. He had been discovered. He had just woken up and was about to use the teleportation talisman when a mysterious force suddenly appeared in the surrounding space. This force directly suppressed the space he was in. Just as he was about to use the spatial Dao Law, Lu Shidi and the others appeared in front of him. Along with them were dozens of super experts from the Worldwide Academy. These people surrounded Yi Xian tightly. Yi Xian asked in his heart, "Miss Lian Qian, what should we do?" Lian Qian said, "Surrender." Yi Xian was speechless. Lian Qian added, "Perhaps you can reason with them." Yi Xian thought for a moment and felt that this method was feasible. He was about to speak when Lu Shidi suddenly said, "Kill him. Don't hold back. Everyone attack together." As soon as he finished speaking, the flute in his hand suddenly transformed into a green ray of light that shot explosively towards Yi Xian. Lin Xiaoshu, who was next to him, also suddenly made a move. He opened his palm and a thick book appeared in his palm. In the next moment the ancient book suddenly flipped open and pages flew out. These pages were like blades that flew towards Yi Xian. One blade after another, extremely sharp. Meanwhile, the surrounding experts from the Worldwide Academy attacked as well. Yi Xian was stunned. They didn't even give him a chance to speak. He naturally couldn't resist so many people attacking at the same time. However, at this moment he had to resist even if he couldn't. Yi Xian's body suddenly ignited. It wasn't soul ignition, but he had devoured a drop of ancestral heavenly dragon blood, strengthening his body. When the dragon blood entered his body, Yi Xian's body underwent an earth-shattering change. Scales suddenly appeared all over his body. At this moment Yi Xian felt like his entire body was filled with boundless energy, but it still wasn't enough. So, he immediately circulated the energy of the earth, and it instantly converged throughout his body. Yi Xian suddenly drew his sword and swung it forward. Bang! A world-shaking explosion suddenly resounded. Yi Xian retreated madly, and the scales throughout his body actually started to crack inch by inch. When he was 3 kilometers away, all the scales on his body had fallen off, and then his body started to crack apart. When he finally stopped moving, countless rifts had appeared all over his body, and some of the rifts were so deep that even his internal organs could be seen. Even though he'd survived it, he was in an extremely terrible state. His entire body had changed beyond recognition, and he didn't seem like a human anymore. However, the expressions of Lu Shidi and the others grew even more solemn. Yi Xian had actually resisted their joint attack. Was that normal? Of course it wasn't. Lu Shidi stared fixedly at Yi Xian. At this moment he finally understood why Qin Tian had been constantly targeting Yi Xian. If Yi Xian was allowed to grow, then he would definitely become a huge threat to the academy. He was truly too monstrous. Lu Shidi was just about to attack again when a group of experts suddenly rushed over from afar. It was Shen Xinghe, Fu Wenzong and the other experts. Shen Xinghe instantly heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that Yi Xian was still alive. He'd been afraid that he would be too late. Fortunately, Yi Xian was still alive. Lu Shidi gazed at Yi Xian from afar, and the killing intent in his eyes wasn't concealed at all. Meanwhile, Shen Xinghe spoke abruptly, "Young martial ancestor, you leave first." "Leave first?" Yi Xian shook his head. He knew that the Worldwide Academy wouldn't let them leave today. Yi Xian took out a bottle of life spring water and drank it. Soon his body began to recover at an extremely fast speed. Meanwhile, rays of white light suddenly shot into the sky from all around the Worldwide Academy. The white light formed a huge light shield that enveloped the surroundings, and more experts from the Worldwide Academy appeared in the surroundings. Obviously they didn't intend to let Yi Xian and the others leave. Below, Shen Xinghe's face was expressionless. Young martial ancestor, you leave first. Lu Yong wanted to say something but hesitated. At this moment Yi Xian suddenly said, Old Shen, don't even think about leaving. Shen Xinghe looked at Yi Xian. At this moment, Yi Xian had recovered about 50% to 60%. Yi Xian smiled and said, they won't let us leave. We only have a single choice now, and it's to fight them to the death. Lu Yong nodded, just as young martial ancestor said, we have no way out now. If we lose this battle, then I, Fu Wenzong, will vanish from this world, and I won't have any chance to make a comeback. So we can only fight. As he spoke, he gazed at Yi Xian. Young martial ancestor, can you still fight? Yi Xian smiled, of course. As soon as he finished speaking, he withdrew another drop of ancestral heavenly dragon's blood and drank it. In next to no time, a strand of formidable energy converged within his entire body. This energy was intoxicating. Yi Xian slowly clenched his right fist. He raised his head to look at Lu Shidi and then he grinned, Dean Lu, do you dare to fight me? A declaration of war. Everyone looked at Yi Xian when they heard this. Yi Xian intends to challenge Lu Shidi? In midair, Lu Shidi gazed at Yi Xian. He was slightly surprised because he hadn't expected that Yi Xian would challenge him. In all fairness, Yi Xian was absolutely not a match for him. Regardless of whether it was combat experience or cultivation, Yi Xian was absolutely not a match for him. However, Yi Xian had done it. There's something fishy going on. Lu Shidi shook his head and smiled, all right. He knew that there was something fishy going on, but he still accepted the challenge. It was a problem of morale. If he didn't fight, then it would severely affect their morale. Moreover, why would he have to fear Yi Xian? In midair, Lu Shidi walked slowly towards Yi Xian and he grinned, Yi Xian, I'm very curious about exactly how. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly vanished. In the blink of an eye, a blood-red prisoner character suddenly appeared above Lu Shidi, and then a strand of formidable energy instantly enveloped Lu Shidi. At the same time, a ray of light suddenly arrived in front of Lu Shidi, and another formidable energy enveloped Lu Shidi as soon as it arrived. The sword domain. At the instant that the sword domain appeared, Lu Shidi's expression finally changed. At this moment he sensed the aura of death. Right at this moment, Lin Xiaoshu suddenly attacked. He tossed out an ancient book and smashed it against the blood-red prisoner character. Bang! The prisoner character trembled violently, and it was at this moment that Lu Shidi was blasted 300 m away. However, he'd lost his right hand. Everyone in the surroundings was stunned. Meanwhile, Yi Xian glanced at Lin Xiaoshu and Lu Shidi and then he spat, Tui. Shameless. Everyone was speechless. P.S. Have any readers gone on a blind date? What should I pay attention to when going on a blind date? Besides that, what should I tell them if they ask about my income? Should I tell them the truth or exaggerate a little? Chapter 892. At that moment, the faces of the worldwide academy powerhouses in the field were a little ugly. They had agreed on a one-on-one fight, but Lin Xiaoshu had suddenly attacked. That was really a little disgraceful. Lin Xiaoshu was silent. He also knew that it was disgraceful to do so, but he had to attack just now because if he hadn't, Lu Shidi might have died. Lu Shidi's strength was far superior to Yi Xian's, and he was caught off guard by Yi Xian. If he was killed just like that, it wouldn't be worth it. Therefore he attacked. In the distance, Lu Shidi's face was frighteningly gloomy at that moment. He really didn't expect that he would almost be killed by Yi Xian. He didn't look down on Yi Xian. On the contrary, he valued Yi Xian very much. However, Yi Xian's sword just now was far beyond his expectations. Yi Xian used several kinds of power in that sword, and each of them could be said to be able to destroy heaven and earth. At that moment, Yi Xian suddenly chuckled and said, Is this the so-called one-on-one fight? As he said that, he glanced at the worldwide academy powerhouses in the field and laughed. This is a one-on-one fight? Ah. In the field, Fu Wenzong and the other powerhouses all had disdainful expressions. Yi Xian's realm was much lower than Lu Shidi's. Even so, the worldwide academy still wanted to fight 2 against 1. This kind of behavior was really despicable. In the air, the expressions of the worldwide academy powerhouses were also extremely ugly to look at. They wanted to fight back but found that there was no way to do so. Indeed, they were the ones who were being unreasonable. At that moment, Lu Shidi, who was not far away, suddenly said, Yi Xian, I underestimated you. Yi Xian smiled and said, Since you underestimated me, then the 2 of you can come at me together. Lu Shidi looked at Yi Xian. I'll lower my realm to fight you and I'll lower my realm by 1 realm. As soon as he said that, his realm suddenly plummeted. Soon he directly became a cosmos realm. Lu Shidi looked at Yi Xian. Again? Yi Xian smiled and said, when you're about to lose you let someone else do it? Lu Shidi said, don't worry. This time no one will make a move. Yi Xian thought for a moment and then he said, how about this? For the sake of absolute fairness, we won't utilize our profound energy, divine abilities or any divine treasures, and we'll compete in basic cultivation. Alright? Lu Shidi was about to speak when Lin Xiaoshu suddenly said, I'm afraid it's a trap. Yi Xian laughed and said, I am haha. Lin Xiaoshu looked at Yi Xian. Showy and dirty tricks. He's not a good person. Yi Xian asked, are you a good person? Lin Xiaoshu was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly waved his hand and said, I don't want to fight a war of words with you. It's just a matter of whether you want to fight or not. Lin Xiaoshu was about to speak when Lu Shidi suddenly said, Xiaoshu, don't interfere. Lin Xiaoshu wanted to speak but hesitated. Lu Shidi smiled and said, or, in your heart, I'm really not as good as him? Lin Xiaoshu didn't say anything and retreated to the side. In the distance, Yi Xian opened his palm, and a sword appeared in his hand. This sword wasn't the executing heaven sword, but a very ordinary sword. Lu Shidi opened his palm, and there was a green flute in his hand. This is an ordinary long bamboo flute. Yi Xian nodded and said, then let's start. As he said this, he seemed to think of something and suddenly looked at Shen Xinghe and the others on the right. Seniors, no matter what happens later, don't do anything. Don't be like others. We, the people of Fu Wenzong, even if we die, we must die with integrity. Hearing Yi Xian's words, the blood of the Fu Wenzong powerhouses in the field suddenly boiled. Shen Xinghe, this chapter is not finished, please continue to the next page. Suddenly he laughed and said, good job little grandmaster. We the Fu Wenzong are proud of you. After that he looked at Lu Shidi who was opposite him. Lu Shidi smiled and said, don't worry, no one in the worldwide academy will help me. As he said this he looked at Lin Xiaoshu and said, I can die but don't let others look down on the academy. After a moment of silence Lin Xiaoshu nodded. Lu Shidi looked at Yi Xian and said, let's begin. Yi Xian stood with his sword in hand and did not make a move, using silence to stop the enemy. In the distance Lu Shidi also did not make a move. Because of what happened before, he did not dare to underestimate Yi Xian. This young man before him really had the ability to kill him. Just like that, the two of them were in a deadlock. In the distance, Yi Xian suddenly said in his heart, Miss Lian Qian, this person before me and Chen Yiming are both headmasters, but I feel that this person is not as strong as Chen Yiming. He still remembered that Chen Yiming's strength could be said to completely crush him. Lian Qian said softly, firstly, this person before you is not weak. He was careless and did not guard against you, so you killed him when he was least expecting it. If he was prepared, you would not have been able to hurt him. Secondly, among the headmasters there are strong and weak ones. Chen Yiming's strength is only second to Wen Xiu's among the headmasters. Also, this person before you is not weak. In my opinion, your chances of winning are less than 20%. However, you are sneaky, so I have decided to give you a bonus. You have at least a 40% chance of winning. Sneaky. Yi Xian was speechless. To think that he was such a person in Lian Qian's heart. Without thinking too much, Yi Xian looked at Lu Shidi who was opposite him. This battle was going to be a tough one. At this moment, Lu Shidi suddenly walked toward Yi Xian. Seeing this, everyone looked at Lu Shidi. Lu Shidi walked very slowly as if he was taking a stroll. He walked slowly toward Yi Xian with a calm smile on his face. Not far away, Xiao Qi frowned slightly. Force. Lu Shidi was using an invisible force to suppress Yi Xian. He wanted to force Yi Xian to make the first move, or crush Yi Xian with his aura. Xiao Qi looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian naturally knew Lu Shidi's goal, but he did not make a move. Lu Shidi was getting closer and closer to him, forcing him to make a move. Yi Xian still did not make a move. When Lu Shidi was 6 feet away from Yi Xian suddenly walked toward Lu Shidi. He held the sword in his hand calmly. Just like that, the two of them got closer and closer. When they were 5 feet apart, Lu Shidi suddenly smiled. You are really patient. Then let me go first. As soon as he finished speaking, he was about to make a move. But at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly charged forward and slashed at him with his sword. It had to be said that this slash was extremely good, and the timing was very accurate. Unfortunately, in his opinion, this slash was not a threat to him. Under everyone's gaze, Lu Shidi suddenly held his flute and pushed forward. He was confident in his strength. At this moment, the light sword in Yi Xian's hand was suddenly replaced by a heavy iron sword. Boom. As soon as Lu Shidi reacted, he retreated more than 10 feet away. Before he could stop, a flying sword suddenly slashed at him. This was not a sword driven by qi but a flying sword driven by pure physical strength. Lu Shidi narrowed his eyes and blocked with his flute. Bang! The flying sword was directly blocked. At this moment Yi Xian had already appeared in front of Lu Shidi. He held the heavy sword with both hands and slashed down. Although he did not use Xian Qi, this slash was still extremely heavy. This chapter is not finished, please continue to the next page. Physical strength. At this moment, Lu Shidi understood why Yi Xian sealed his Xian Qi to fight with him. It was because Yi Xian's physical body was strong enough. Without thinking too much, Lu Shidi suddenly attacked. Bang! Yi Xian returned to his original position. After he stopped, he waved his hands and the heavy sword and light sword returned to his hands. Yi Xian looked up at Lu Shidi. In that instant, Lu Shidi's attack was faster than his. Lu Shidi looked at Yi Xian. Without any nonsense, he suddenly opened his palm and pointed lightly. The flute in his hand suddenly turned into a green light and flew out. Although he did not use Xian Qi, the flute's speed was like a bolt of lightning. Faster than his flying sword. In the distance Yi Xian blocked with his sword. Bang! Yi Xian's arms trembled violently and he retreated. In the process of retreating, Lu Shidi suddenly appeared in front of him. The next moment Lu Shidi punched at his head. The punch was like thunder. Yi Xian did not dodge the punch. He turned his left wrist and stabbed forward with his sword. This stab was aimed at Lu Shidi's chest. A life for a life. Lu Shidi frowned slightly. He did not expect this. He did not choose to exchange his life with Yi Xian because in his opinion, his strength crushed Yi Xian. Exchanging his life with Yi Xian was a very stupid thing to do. Lu Shidi retracted his hand and pressed down. Bang! Yi Xian's sword was pressed to the ground, and at this moment, Yi Xian's body suddenly collided with him. Lu Shidi blocked with his left hand. Bang! With an explosion Lu Shidi took a few steps back. At this moment, a heavy sword slashed down from above his head. The sword fell and the sound of air being torn resounded. At this moment, Lu Shidi gently moved his fingers and a green light suddenly blasted at Yi Xian's chest. Bang! Yi Xian was directly sent flying. The moment he flew out, Lu Shidi, who was in the distance, suddenly took a quick step forward. With this step he came directly in front of Yi Xian and punched Yi Xian's face. Yi Xian almost instinctively slashed forward with his sword. The fist and the sword collided. Bang! Yi Xian retreated again, and as soon as he stopped, a green light was already in front of him. It was that flute again. Yi Xian took a small step back with his sword in hand. Then he thrust his sword forward. This thrust directly stabbed the flute. Bang! Yi Xian's iron sword cracked, and at this moment, a figure suddenly appeared in front of him. Almost at the same time, the light sword in Yi Xian's hand was replaced by a heavy sword. He held the sword with both hands and slashed. Bang! With a muffled sound, a figure retreated more than 10 feet away. It was Lu Shidi. As soon as Lu Shidi stopped, Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of him, and Yi Xian slashed down with his sword. Right at this moment a sudden change occurred. A powerful force suddenly swept out from Lu Shidi's body, and this force instantly enveloped Yi Xian. At the sight of this, the expressions of Fu Wenzong and the other experts changed drastically. Lu Shidi utilized his profound energy. Not far away, Yi Xian hadn't even reacted when the sword in his hand was seized by Lu Shidi. Then Lu Shidi took the opportunity to stab his sword into Yi Xian's abdomen and he grinned. Are you surprised? Are you surprised? End of this chapter. Chapter 893. The eyes of Xin Xinghe and the others almost split open when they saw Lu Shidi stab his sword into Yi Xian's stomach. On the other hand, the experts of the Worldwide Academy were stunned as well. They hadn't expected that Lu Shidi would suddenly utilize profound energy. Even Lin Xiaoshu hadn't expected Lu Shidi to suddenly do that. Doing so was dishonorable. But it was good because they could directly deal with Yi Xian and eliminate a huge problem for the academy. In the distance, Lu Shidi started laughing when he stabbed Yi Xian's sword into Yi Xian's stomach. A fair duel? In his opinion, there was no such thing as fairness in this world. Even when his teacher was still alive, there was no such thing as absolute fairness. The victor was king. That was the eternal truth of this world. So long as Yi Xian died and Fu Wenzong was destroyed, then everyone would forget about Yi Xian and Fu Wenzong in less than a month. History would only remember the victor. Right at this moment, his expression changed drastically because Yi Xian had suddenly grinned, and then a sword was stabbed into the center of Lu Shidi's forehead. The soul-suppressing sword. The soul-suppressing sword had suppressed Lu Shidi's soul. This sudden and unexpected event shocked everyone here. Lin Xiaoshu was about to attack when a huge amount of talismans covered the heavens and the earth as they surged towards him. The experts of the Worldwide Academy attacked in succession. However, Fu Wenzong's group didn't stand by idly and charged forward. In front of Yi Xian, Lu Shidi looked at Yi Xian in shock. "You..." Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly withdrew the executing heaven sword and then he swung it swiftly. Lu Shidi's head flew into the air. His body was destroyed. On the other hand, the soul-suppressing sword had directly absorbed Lu Shidi's soul. Yi Xian was expressionless. He hated nonsense the most. The more nonsense there was, the more unforeseen events would occur. If he continued to talk nonsense with Lu Shidi, what if other experts from the Worldwide Academy came to save him? At that time he would cry. Therefore it was better to kill him first. Actually, if Lu Shidi didn't play dirty tricks, he really couldn't beat him. Although his heavy sword and light sword were strong, Lu Shidi's realm was too high, and his battle awareness was even stronger than his. Therefore if they fought normally he had no hope of winning. However, he did not expect that Lu Shidi would go back on his word again. He did not expect that Lu Shidi would use his sword to kill him. Lu Shidi did not underestimate him at first, but the moment he was stabbed, Lu Shidi relaxed. Because Lu Shidi thought that the outcome was already set. And this moment was Yi Xian's chance. After the soul-suppressing sword absorbed Lu Shidi's soul, its aura suddenly skyrocketed. It was going to evolve. Yi Xian was delighted. He hurriedly put the soul-suppressing sword into the prison pagoda, and then he looked at Lin Xiaoshu who was not far away. At this moment, the one fighting Lin Xiaoshu was Xiao Qi, and only Xiao Qi could barely hold back Lin Xiaoshu. Yi Xian stomped his right foot. A ray of sword light tore through the field. Boundless sword. In the distance, Lin Xiaoshu's expression suddenly changed. He suddenly turned around and a ray of sword light had already arrived between his eyebrows. The sword had entered half an inch. At this moment of life and death, an illusory ancient book suddenly appeared above Lin Xiaoshu's head. Boom. Yi Xian and Xiao Qi were directly sent flying by a powerful force. After Yi Xian stopped, he looked at Lin Xiaoshu. At this moment, Lin Xiaoshu was wrapped in a golden light. At this moment, Lian Qian's voice rang in Yi Xian's mind. The Book of Holy Words was given to him by Master in the past. This book is a defensive treasure, and with the protection of the Holy Words, your sword won't be able to break it. Yi Xian was silent. Damn, this Worldwide Academy had too many treasures. As if he had thought of something, he suddenly opened his palm, and the executing heaven sword flew in front of Xiao Qi. "You use this sword." Xiao Qi looked at Yi Xian and Yi Xian said, "You hold him back, I will kill the others." Xiao Qi nodded, "Okay." After saying that, she held the executing heaven sword and charged out. The sound of the sword rang out, shaking the sky. One had to admit that Xiao Qi was really strong. It could be said that if Yi Xian didn't use those messy external items, he might not be able to defeat Xiao Qi. After Xiao Qi held Lin Xiaoshu back, Yi Xian charged towards the experts from the Worldwide Academy. With his current strength, how could these experts from the Worldwide Academy be a match for him? Instant kill. When Yi Xian's sword passed, heads would fall to the ground. "Stop, Yi Xian." At this moment, Lin Xiaoshu's voice rang out in the sky. Very quickly, some experts from the Worldwide Academy rushed towards Yi Xian, but at this moment Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. Boundless sword. The experts from the Worldwide Academy glanced at each other. "Where's Yi Xian?" Suddenly, a shrill cry resounded from behind them. All of them turned around and they saw a man's head flying into the air. However, Yi Xian still hadn't shown himself. The experts from the Worldwide Academy were horrified when they witnessed this scene. Xiao Qi was suddenly blasted away. Lin Xiaoshu looked down and then he opened his palm, and the Book of Holy Wisdom appeared in his hand. Meanwhile, a ray of light slashed towards him from the right. Yi Xian. This time Yi Xian's target wasn't anyone else but him. Up until now, Lin Xiaoshu was the strongest fighter in the Worldwide Academy. If he could deal with Lin Xiaoshu, then the rest would be nothing to worry about. However, his sword slashed directly against the golden light emanated by the Book of Holy Wisdom. Bang! Yi Xian was blasted flying again. When he stopped moving, Xiao Qi walked over to Yi Xian's side and spoke softly, "He's invincible with that thing." Yi Xian glanced at the surroundings. At this moment, Fu Wenzong and the experts from the Worldwide Academy were locked in battle. Fu Wenzong's individual combat strength was inferior to the experts from the Worldwide Academy. However, Fu Wenzong had talismans and they'd made up for this gap. Meanwhile, Lin Xiaoshu suddenly said, "Get out of the formation." The formation. Lin Xiaoshu had just descended when an ancient golden book suddenly shot into the sky from below. Bang! The entire sky was covered by an expanse of golden light, and it didn't take long for countless golden ancient characters to appear in the surroundings. These ancient characters floated about in the surroundings, and every single one of them emanated extremely formidable energy. Fu Wenzong and the other experts hurriedly retreated when they witnessed this scene, and then they gathered together and withdrew all sorts of formidable defensive talismans. Meanwhile, Lu Yong suddenly appeared by Yi Xian's side, and he spoke in a low voice, "Young martial ancestor, we have to leave this sect. Otherwise, we'll forever be in a passive position." Leave Fu Wenzong. Yi Xian glanced at the surroundings. "It's quite difficult to leave now." Lu Yong asked, "Do you have a way?" Yi Xian replied, "Leave if you have the chance later. Don't pay attention to me and Xiaoqi. Understand?" Lu Yong hesitated to speak, but Yi Xian spoke softly, "All of you leave. I'll be able to protect myself." Lu Yong nodded, "All right." Yi Xian looked up into the sky. The golden characters were growing in number, and strands of formidable energy were appearing incessantly in the surroundings. In midair, Lin Xiaoshu suddenly pressed down lightly with his right hand, and it didn't take long for the golden characters to start trembling violently. A short moment later, countless golden characters suddenly descended from the sky. The expressions of Xin Xinghe and the others instantly changed when they witnessed this scene. The consequences would be unimaginable if they were allowed to descend. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly floated into the air. He opened his palm, and a long brush suddenly appeared in his hand. Lin Xiaoshu, who was hovering in the air, immediately paled at the sight of this long brush. The Heaven Condemnation Brush. Yi Xian grinned, and then he waved the brush. In an instant, an enormous brush shield suddenly appeared above him. Fu Wenzong and the other experts, and the ancient characters in the sky smashed against the brush shield. Rumble. Numerous explosions resounded incessantly in the surroundings. On the other hand, Yi Xian's countenance instantly turned pale. He hurriedly withdrew a bottle of life spring water and gulped it down. Meanwhile, Xin Xinghe suddenly said, "Give him a healing talisman." As soon as he finished speaking, a few dozen orange healing talismans suddenly flew towards Yi Xian. Bang, bang, bang. Beams of emerald green light burst out of Yi Xian's body. Yi Xian was speechless. The golden characters in midair were completely blocked by Yi Xian's heaven-punishing brush. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly grinned, and then he suddenly pointed his brush towards the sky. "Attack!" As soon as he spoke, the enormous brush shield suddenly trembled violently, and then countless golden characters suddenly shot out from within it. Copy. Not only could this brush attack and defend, but it could also copy. When he saw the countless ancient characters rushing towards him, Lin Xiaoshu's face instantly darkened. He naturally recognized this heaven-punishing brush. It was also the treasure of the Worldwide Academy. Yi Xian took the treasure of the Worldwide Academy and used it to attack the Worldwide Academy. Without much time to think, Lin Xiaoshu suddenly took a step forward. He waved his right hand, and the Book of Holy Divinity suddenly flew out. In the next moment, rays of golden light poured down from the sky like a waterfall. Rumble. In an instant, the entire sky began to tremble violently, and countless waves of air rippled in all directions. And at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly opened his palm, and a mirror appeared in his hand. He silently recited an incantation, and the next moment, the space in the sky suddenly began to overlap. Myriad-dimensional realm. Seeing this mirror, Lin Xiaoshu's face turned even uglier. How many treasures of the Worldwide Academy did Yi Xian have? He didn't have much time to think, because the myriad-dimensional mirror was a group attack treasure, and ordinary disciples of the Academy couldn't block it at all. Lin Xiaoshu raised his hands, and the overlapping space in the surroundings suddenly began to slowly return to its original state. And at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly soared into the sky. He didn't attack Lin Xiaoshu, but instead slashed towards the right. Bang. The light screen that was covered with golden characters was directly slashed apart by his sword. Yi Xian hurriedly said, "Let's go." Lu Yong immediately roared, "Let's go." Soon he and Xin Xinghe led the many Fu Wenzong experts and flew towards the horizon. Yi Xian looked at Xiaoqi, and Xiaoqi nodded. Yi Xian stomped his right foot, and turned into a ray of sword light that soared into the sky. Xiaoqi also followed closely behind. And at this moment there was a sudden change. Below, a powerful force suddenly soared into the sky. Xiaoqi, who was behind Yi Xian, sensed the danger and immediately turned around to slash. Bang! The ray of sword light shattered, and a powerful force directly swept Xiaoqi downwards. Yi Xian, who had already disappeared into the horizon, suddenly stopped. Without the slightest hesitation, he directly turned around and rushed into the Worldwide Academy. P.S. Recruit a walk-on, a very interesting walk-on, leave your name. Chapter 894. Yi Xian had just rushed back to the Worldwide Academy when the sound of a sword rang in front of him. Then, a figure retreated in front of him. This person was Xiaoqi. At this moment, Xiaoqi's mouth was stained with blood and his expression was extremely solemn. Yi Xian raised his head and looked not far away. There stood an old man. It was this old man who had attacked just now. It's him. At this moment, Lian Qian's voice suddenly rang in Yi Xian's mind. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Who? Lian Qian said in a low voice, Han Ji. Back then, the head hierarch of the Academy's Wuyuan was in charge of teaching martial arts to all Wuyuan students. He was not one of the 6 hierarchs, but his strength was no weaker than them. Yi Xian was silent. At this moment, Xiaoqi suddenly said, "Be careful." Yi Xian nodded and looked up at the sky. Fu Wenzong and the other powerhouses had already retreated. He did not ask Xin Xinghe and the others to come over because it was too disadvantageous for them to fight in the Worldwide Academy. In the sky, Xin Xinghe looked in the direction of the Worldwide Academy below. Go and get that thing. Lu Yong was shocked. Senior brother. That thing is my Fu Wenzong's last resort. Xin Xinghe looked at Lu Yong. Is the person more important or that thing? Lu Yong did not say anything else and immediately turned to leave. As Xin Xinghe had said, nothing was more important than Yi Xian. He had to protect Yi Xian at all costs. Worldwide Academy. Han Ji, who stood before Yi Xian and Xiaoqi, spoke abruptly in a light voice. I never imagined that the day would come when my Myriad Dimension Academy would fall to such a state. Someone actually attacked our academy, how shameful. Lin Xiaoshu walked to Han Ji's side and said calmly, we cannot escape the blame for falling to such a state. Han Ji nodded. Yes. With that he looked at Yi Xian. I've heard of you. It said that you have the treasure of the Worldwide Academy. Yi Xian grinned. He opened his palm and the prison pagoda appeared in his hand. It's in my hands. Do you want it? Han Ji looked at Yi Xian. You're very confident. He is also very arrogant. Yi Xian laughed. I'll fight even if I'm confident. I'll still fight even if I'm not confident. Why shouldn't I be more arrogant? Han Ji nodded. Lu Shidi died in your hands, which proves that you have strength. Come, let me see how strong you are. As soon as he finished speaking, he stomped his right foot. Boom. The space in front of Yi Xian suddenly shattered. Yi Xian suddenly roared, gather. As soon as he finished speaking, the space in front of him suddenly returned to its original state. Space Dao Law. At this moment, a long spear pierced through the air. Yi Xian unsheathed his sword and slashed. Boom. An explosion resounded. Yi Xian retreated rapidly. Han Ji, who was in front of him, also retreated several feet. After Yi Xian stopped, the executing heaven sword in his hand suddenly flew out. Immeasurable sword. The sword was like a thunderclap. It was extremely fast. In the distance, Han Ji narrowed his eyes and blocked with his spear. Boom. The long spear shook violently and he retreated instantly. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly appeared above his head. Just as Yi Xian was about to attack, Han Ji twisted his wrist and the long spear in his hand suddenly stabbed at Yi Xian's abdomen. His speed was faster than Yi Xian's. Moreover, the spear was longer than the sword. However, in the air, Yi Xian did not retract his sword. Instead, he forcibly moved his body slightly to the right. Boom. The long spear pierced through Yi Xian's right shoulder while Han Ji retreated over 30 feet away. There was a deep sword mark on his right shoulder. Yi Xian had been hit by his spear, but Han Ji had also taken a sword from Yi Xian, and this sword had almost severed his left hand. Han Ji looked at Yi Xian. He was still not used to Yi Xian's fighting style. Exchanging injury for injury, exchanging life for life. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already in front of Han Ji. At this moment, Han Ji suddenly brandished his long spear. In an instant, spear after spear of light continuously shattered the space around him. The powerful spear of light directly engulfed Yi Xian. At this moment, within the powerful spear of light, sword after sword appeared continuously. Boom, boom, boom. The surrounding space trembled. After about a quarter of an hour, Yi Xian and Han Ji suddenly disappeared. Lin Xiaoshu's face sank when he saw this. Book Realm. In the book realm, Hanji looked around with a solemn expression. Naturally, he recognized this book realm. This book realm could suppress one's cultivation level. Once one's cultivation level was suppressed, his chances of winning against Yi Xian would be lower. Moreover, there were word spirits in this book realm. Yi Xian looked at Hanji and without a word, he vanished on the spot. In the next moment, a sword suddenly appeared in front of Hanji. On the tip of the sword there was a dot of blood red. The word spirit of the word, destroy. Hanji's eyes narrowed slightly at the sight of this, and then he suddenly soared into the air. Moreover, in the next moment, the spear in his hand suddenly slashed down. He didn't dodge but chose to meet it head-on. As soon as the sword and spear collided, boom! An earth-shattering explosion suddenly resounded. Then both of them retreated at the same time and stopped almost at the same time. Hanji looked at the spear in his hand. The body of the spear had cracked. After a moment of silence, he looked at the sword in Yi Xian's hand. What a good sword. I didn't expect that the treasures of my worldwide academy would recognize you as their master. Moreover, that unruly word spirit is also willing to pledge loyalty to you. You're quite capable. Just at this moment, Yi Xian, who was in the distance, suddenly disappeared. Hanji reacted extremely quickly and suddenly rushed forward. As he rushed forward, countless spear lights shot out. These spear lights instantly drowned Yi Xian, and within these spear lights, a sword light suddenly tore through. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Within the book realm, a series of rumbles sounded continuously. After a moment, a figure suddenly flew out. It was Yi Xian. After Yi Xian stopped, a trace of blood slowly flowed out from the corner of his mouth. He looked at the opposite side and saw that Hanji was holding 2 spears in his hands. 2 spears? Hanji looked at Yi Xian. I have to say Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. Before he arrived, his sword arrived first. Light sword. This sword was extremely fast. However, for an old powerhouse like Hanji, Yi Xian's sword speed was not fast enough. He blocked with his spear and accurately blocked Yi Xian's sword. At this moment, Yi Xian's light sword suddenly turned into a heavy sword. Yi Xian wielded the heavy sword and swept it horizontally. Boom! Hanji was instantly swept away by Yi Xian's sword. Yi Xian suddenly took a quick step forward. At this moment, the heavy sword in his hand had changed into a light sword. This sword did not have the great power of the heavy sword, but it was as fast as lightning. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. The next moment, a long spear suddenly attacked from the back of Yi Xian's head. Yi Xian dodged sideways and avoided this spear by a hair's breadth. At the same time, he twisted his wrist and slashed his sword horizontally, aiming for Hanji's abdomen. Hanji blocked with his spear. However, at this moment, Yi Xian's long sword suddenly turned into a heavy sword. Rumble. Hanji was once again sent flying. The moment he was sent flying, Yi Xian's heavy sword turned into a light sword again. The sword was like a sudden clap of thunder flashing past. In the distance, Hanji's pupils suddenly shrank. He raised his spear and stabbed. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly grasped the light sword, and the light sword instantly turned into a heavy sword. The sword arrived. Rumble. Hanji retreated rapidly again. He could not completely withstand the power of Yi Xian's heavy sword. Before Hanji could stop, Yi Xian once again rushed in front of him. Soon the two were engaged in a fierce battle. At this moment, Yi Xian actually showed signs of suppressing Hanji. Of course, this was also because of the book realm. If not for the suppression of the book realm, he would not be able to fight against Hanji. After all, the other party's realm was much higher than his. Just like this, after about a quarter of an hour, Yi Xian directly suppressed Hanji. Sword rule. As Yi Xian fought with Hanji, he became more and more proficient in using sword rule. Of course, the most important thing was the executing heaven sword in his hand. This sword was too sharp. After losing the advantage of his realm, Hanji did not dare to face this sword head-on. To Yi Xian, the only flaw was that he lacked a good heavy sword. The heavy sword he was using now was given to him by the sword spirit. It was very ordinary. If this heavy sword was the same as the executing heaven sword, his strength could increase by at least 10 to 20%. About a quarter of an hour later. Boom. The surrounding bookshelves in the book realm suddenly shook violently. Immediately, 2 figures retreated rapidly at the same time. After Yi Xian stopped, the sword in his hand suddenly flew out. In the distance, Hanji suddenly clasped his hands together, and this time he directly caught Yi Xian's sword. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of him, and at the same time, a heavy sword slashed down from above his head. Hanji's pupils suddenly shrank. He hurriedly let go of the executing heaven sword and dodged backward. At this moment Yi Xian's heavy sword suddenly turned into the executing heaven sword again. This time the sword directly pierced into Han Ji's chest. However, it only pierced half an inch because at some point in time Han Ji's long spear had also pierced into Yi Xian's chest. This time Han Ji chose to exchange injury for injury. And at this moment Yi Xian suddenly rushed forward. He directly let Han Ji's long spear pierce through his chest, and at the same time his sword also pierced through Han Ji's body. A life for a life. Han Ji did not expect Yi Xian to be so ruthless. He looked at Yi Xian and grinned, "With our strength neither of us can kill the other." At this moment the executing heaven sword in Yi Xian's hand suddenly turned into the soul-suppressing sword. The moment it turned into the soul-suppressing sword, Yi Xian directly retreated more than 10 feet away, while Han Ji's whole body was stunned on the spot. Soul fixation. At this moment Han Ji's soul was directly fixed by the soul-suppressing sword. Han Ji looked at Yi Xian and was about to speak, but suddenly, a sword suddenly flashed past his neck. Han Ji's head directly flew off, and his soul was instantly absorbed by the soul-suppressing sword. He did not even have the chance to resist. And in the distance Yi Xian sat on the ground. There was a large hole in his chest. In fact, he was also seriously injured. This battle was not won easily at all. In the battle with Han Ji he used the book realm, the word spirit, the executing heaven sword, the soul-suppressing sword, and the dragon blood in his body, especially the ancestral blood of the heavenly dragon. If not for the ancestral blood of the heavenly dragon, his physical strength would not have been able to suppress Han Ji. All in all, this time it was not easy for him to win. It could be said that he gave it his all. At this moment, sitting on the ground, Yi Xian's expression suddenly changed. And at this moment, Lian Qian's voice suddenly sounded in Yi Xian's mind, "That woman is here. Run. Run." At this moment, a light laugh suddenly sounded from within the book realm. The next moment, the book realm actually began to collapse inch by inch. Chapter 895. This sudden turn of events caused Yi Xian's expression to change drastically. Someone could forcefully destroy the book realm? He didn't even have the time to think about it when the space here suddenly shattered into pieces. His face instantly turned as pale as a sheet of paper. Very soon Yi Xian appeared in the Worldwide Academy. Blood continuously flowed from the corner of his mouth. Not far from his right, Xiaoqi knelt on one knee on the ground. In front of her was also a pool of blood. Yi Xian wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. He looked in the distance and saw a woman standing there. She was wearing a dark golden dress that dragged on the ground. Flowing lights overflowed from her dress, as if it was the convergence of a galaxy. It was dazzling. Behind her, 2 long sleeves fluttered in the wind. On the sleeves, 2 black phoenixes were embroidered with their heads held high. In the eyes of the phoenixes, there was a domineering aura that looked down on the world. On her feet she wore a pair of pure black cloth shoes. However, if one looked closely, they would discover that this pair of cloth shoes was actually made of dragon skin. What was worth mentioning was the woman's long hair. The woman's hair reached her waist and her entire body was golden. In front of her forehead, 2 strands of bangs fluttered. The woman's appearance was also peerless. She had an oval face, phoenix eyes, and the slight curve at the corner of her mouth made her look somewhat cynical and unruly. This person was the Worldwide Academy's Zhang Wenxiu. In terms of strength, she was only second to the female teacher of the Worldwide Academy. In the past, this Zhang Wenxiu was much more terrifying than the female teacher. This was because the female teacher was kind and had never made enemies with anyone. The people of the 5th dimension were also smart and would not provoke the female teacher. However, this Zhang Wenxiu was different. She was a crazy witch in the past. If you did not provoke her, she would provoke you. In the 5th dimension, this woman's reputation could be said to be notorious. Even within the Worldwide Academy, no one dared to provoke her. This was because she was really good at fighting. Zhang Wenxiu sized up Yi Xian, then looked at Lin Xiaoshu. "Is this the guy who killed Lu Shidi and Han Ji?" Lin Xiaoshu nodded. "Yes." Zhang Wenxiu suddenly threw a slap at Lin Xiaoshu. Lin Xiaoshu's expression changed as he raised the Book of Holy Words to block the slap. Boom. Under everyone's watchful eyes, Lin Xiaoshu and the Book of Holy Prophecy were sent flying. Not only that, but the Book of Holy Prophecy also split open. Everyone, Yi Xian's eyelids twitched when he saw this. This woman is extraordinarily strong. At this time, Zhang Wenxiu glanced at the Worldwide Academy powerhouses and made a shameful face. "How embarrassing. You guys are such a disgrace." As she spoke, she suddenly pointed at Lin Xiaoshu. Especially you, you're practically a piece of trash. How can you still have the face to live? If I were you, I'd just find a piece of paper and kill myself. And that Lu Shidi and Tianji, they're both super big pieces of trash. They've cultivated for so many years, yet they were killed by a kid who hasn't even grown his hair yet. It's good that they're dead, it's so fucking good that they're dead. Everyone, Yi Xian had a strange expression on his face. Is there something wrong with this woman? At this moment, Zhang Wenxiu suddenly looked at Yi Xian and sized up Yi Xian. You're quite capable. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, be reasonable. It was your worldwide academy who came looking for trouble with me first. Be reasonable? Zhang Wenxiu sneered. What the hell is that? Yi Xian. At this moment, Lian Qian's voice suddenly rang out in Yi Xian's mind. Run. Just as Yi Xian was about to speak, Zhang Wenxiu suddenly grabbed with her right hand and a powerful force enveloped Yi Xian. Come out. As soon as she finished speaking, she lifted her right hand and directly pulled Lian Qian out of the world prison pagoda. At this moment, Yi Xian's expression became extremely solemn. This woman's strength was even more terrifying than Chen Yiming's. Yo tsk, Zhang Wenxiu sized up Lian Qian. I was wondering who it was. So it's Lian Qian. So you're not dead yet? Lian Qian looked at Zhang Wenxiu and did not speak. Zhang Wenxiu looked around. Where's your big sister? Don't tell me she's dead. If that's the case, I'll be very sad. You know that if I can't kill her with my own hands, I'll regret it for the rest of my life. Lian Qian's face was expressionless. If you're so powerful, why don't you go and fight with the headmaster? Zhang Wenxiu suddenly slapped Lian Qian. Lian Qian narrowed her eyes and put her hands together. A seal suddenly appeared in front of her, but the seal instantly shattered. Boom. Lian Qian instantly retreated. When she stopped, a trickle of blood slowly flowed from the corner of her mouth. Zhang Wenxiu looked at Lian Qian expressionlessly. We haven't seen each other for so many years, but your eloquence is getting better. Yi Xian suddenly said, I think her eloquence is still not as good as yours. Zhang Wenxiu looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled. I've heard a lot about the Worldwide Academy. I have to say that I'm quite impressed by the former prophet and some of the people from the Worldwide Academy. However, after interacting with you guys for so long, I've realized that you guys are really a pile of dog sh*t. As he said that, he pointed at Zhang Wenxiu angrily. You can't stand others doing well. That Xiaota recognized me as his master. This is Xiaota's own choice. Why can't the academy let him? Also, when you beat up the young, the old comes. What? Does the Worldwide Academy only know how to bully the young? Zhang Wenxiu sneered. Don't talk to me about this nonsense. Of course, as you said, the academy is indeed a pile of dog sh*t. Yi Xian was speechless. Zhang Wenxiu continued, Actually, I've been annoyed by this academy for a long time. Unfortunately, it was created by teacher. No matter how much I dislike it, I can't destroy it with my own hands. I won't let others destroy it either. As for bullying the young, I feel that since I'm stronger than you, why can't I bully the young? If you're so capable, you should become stronger too. The corner of Yi Xian's mouth twitched. This woman was not playing by the rules. Zhang Wenxiu looked at Lian Qian. Lian Qian, no matter what, you were created by teacher. I can't believe you helped an outsider destroy the academy. I didn't know that you had such a rebellious bone in you. Lian Qian was expressionless. Zhang Wenxiu, he's not an outsider. He's master's inheritor. Zhang Wenxiu suddenly said angrily, Bullsh*t. How many years is teacher different from him? Inheritor? Do you think I'm a pig? Lian Qian said in a low voice, Xiaota has recognized him as his master. Zhang Wenxiu was expressionless. Is Xiaota master? Xiaota is just a piece of trash created by teacher. Can he represent teacher? At this moment, the prison pagoda in Yi Xian's body suddenly trembled. Yi Xian was speechless. Zhang Wenxiu looked at Lian Qian coldly. Even if he's teacher's inheritor, so what? Am I not teacher's inheritor? Also, have you forgotten what teacher said in the past? Those who harm each other will be punished by the heavens and earth. This kid killed Lu Shidi. If he's teacher's inheritor, then he's a taboo in our sect. Lian Qian was about to speak when Zhang Wenxiu suddenly waved his hand. Why am I wasting my time talking nonsense with you? Really, it's a waste of time. I'll deal with you guys first, then I'll go and destroy Fu Wenzong. How dare any Tom, Dick, or Harry bully my academy? As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly clenched her right hand towards Yi Xian from afar. In an instant, the space around Yi Xian started to warp. Yi Xian was horrified and he suddenly roared furiously, Break! As soon as he spoke, The space Dao Law suddenly appeared between his brows, and it didn't take long for the space before him to start shattering. However, his face instantly turned pale. In the distance, Zhang Wenxiu laughed coldly. Space Dao Law. As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly waved her right hand. With just a light wave, the space before Yi Xian started to shatter layer by layer, and Yi Xian retreated explosively. When Xiao Qi saw this, she transformed into a ray of sword light that slashed towards Zhang Wenxiu. It was a very powerful attack. However, Zhang Wenxiu's eyes were filled with disdain, and she stomped her right foot lightly. Bang! The ray of sword light shattered, and Xiao Qi was blasted flying. She couldn't fight back at all. The gap between them was too huge. After Yi Xian stopped moving, he glanced at his body. At this moment, his body was actually covered in cracks. Moreover, his Space Dao Law had suffered a heavy injury just now as well. This was the first time his Space Dao Law had been injured. This woman was even more terrifying than Qin Yiming. Meanwhile, Xiao Qi walked over to Yi Xian's side, and she gazed at Zhang Wenxiu in the distance as she spoke in a low voice. This woman is very strong. Yi Xian nodded. She outsmarted her opponent. Xiao Qi gazed at Yi Xian. Let's watch your performance. Yi Xian nodded slightly, and then he gazed at Zhang Wenxiu. Miss Wenxiu, I want to say a few words before you kill me. Before Zhang Wenxiu could speak, Lin Xiaoshu suddenly said, Don't let him speak. Zhang Wenxiu looked at Lin Xiaoshu, and Lin Xiaoshu said solemnly, This person has a glib tongue and he is good at tricks. It is better to kill him directly. Zhang Wenxiu looked at Lin Xiaoshu. You don't want him to speak, but I want him to. Lin Xiaoshu's face twitched. Was there something wrong with this woman? Although he thought so, he didn't dare to say it out loud. He knew that apart from his former teacher, she wouldn't give face to anyone else. Zhang Wenxiu looked at Yi Xian, and Yi Xian quickly said, Miss Wenxiu, you can't be considered an expert if you kill me. If you have the ability, then kill the people behind me. Do you dare? Zhang Wenxiu smiled. Are you trying to provoke me? Yi Xian said, That's right. It's a provocation. Miss Wenxiu, do you dare to follow me to kill the people behind me? Zhang Wenxiu laughed out loud. You don't say, I want to meet the people behind you. After all, we have to do things in one go. Lead the way. Yi Xian looked at Zhang Wenxiu and then at Lian Qian and 7. Enter the tower. 7 didn't hesitate and entered the prison tower. Lian Qian hesitated and then said, Who are you going to find? Yi Xian said, Let's enter the tower. Lian Qian looked at Yi Xian and didn't say anything else. She entered the prison tower. Yi Xian looked at Zhang Wenxiu. Let's go. After saying that, he turned around and left. In the distance, Lin Xiaoshu wanted to say something, but Zhang Wenxiu suddenly said, Shut up. You retard, stop wasting air. After saying that, she followed Yi Xian. Lin Xiaoshu. P.S. Do you dare to vote for me? Chapter 896. Within the Worldwide Academy, Lin Xiaoshu's expression was extremely unsightly. Based on his understanding of Yi Xian, he was definitely going to play some dirty tricks. That was why he had asked Zhang Wenxiu to kill Yi Xian directly to prevent any future troubles. However, this crazy woman just had to go against him. This crazy woman. Lin Xiaoshu sighed softly. No matter what, this woman still cared about the Worldwide Academy. This time, if it wasn't for this woman's appearance, the Worldwide Academy would probably have lost even more people. As for the Great Formation at the Worldwide Academy, unless it was absolutely necessary, it couldn't be used. This was because it was a deterrent. Once it was used, the Worldwide Academy would lose its final trump card. At that time, the Worldwide Academy would completely lose its current status. Moreover, there would definitely be many forces that would have designs on the Worldwide Bookstore. That was why the Great Formation couldn't be used carelessly. With the current strength of the Worldwide Academy, it could only be used once a year at most. Lin Xiaoshu collected his thoughts and looked into the distance. He hesitated for a while, but in the end he still didn't follow her. He was afraid that if he followed her, it would only ruin things. After all, that woman wasn't normal. In the distant horizon, Yi Xian was flying on his sword. Beside him was Zhang Wenxiu. One had to admit this Zhang Wenxiu was very confident. Of course, she had the capital to be so confident. At this time, Zhang Wenxiu suddenly smiled and said, I'm a little surprised that you were able to make that Xiao Ta recognize you as his master. Yi Xian said, I've seen Qin Yiming before. Zhang Wenxiu said calmly, among the few disciples of master, he's the only one who's decent. It's just that he's a little pedantic. He's always trying to reason with people. He's simply out of his mind. Yi Xian glanced at Zhang Wenxiu and thought to himself, Miss Lian Qian, how did your master fall for this crazy woman in the first place? After a moment of silence, Lian Qian said, although this woman is crazy, don't underestimate her. I'm not talking about her strength but her knowledge. Her knowledge is only a little less than that of the headmaster. Or rather, her knowledge is on par with that of the headmaster. Yi Xian frowned. Is this woman that knowledgeable? Lian Qian said, she is very knowledgeable, and she is the only one in the academy who dares to argue with master. However, she never showed off her knowledge or disdain. She said that her master's methods were useless in this world where only the strong were respected. She also said that the reason why the fifth dimension was so harmonious in the past was because of her master's formidable strength. If her master was weak, others wouldn't even pay attention to him. Therefore, in her opinion, strength is the king. If you have strength, people will be willing to listen to you. If you don't have strength, even if you are reasonable, people will still treat you like a fart. Yi Xian was silent. He had to admit that what this woman said made sense. If a person didn't have strength, who would take him seriously? As the saying goes, don't join the crowd if you don't have money, and don't persuade people if your words are light. At this time, Lian Qian said, this woman has another special strength, and that is the Tao of idealism. She created her own Tao and everything is done according to her heart. Therefore, if she wants to be reasonable, she will be reasonable. If she doesn't want to be reasonable, she will be unreasonable. Speaking up to this point, she paused and then continued, I think that she is a little similar to you. Just like you can be shameless when you want to be. Yi Xian's face was full of black lines. How could she say that? At this time, Zhang Wenxiu suddenly said, have you seen teacher? Prophet. Yi Xian shook his head. I haven't seen him. After a moment of silence, Zhang Wenxiu said softly, I've been looking for him for a long time. Yi Xian said, why did he suddenly disappear? Zhang Wenxiu's face was expressionless. Who knows? As she said that, she suddenly opened her right hand. The next moment, the World Prison Pagoda in Yi Xian's body flew into her hand. The World Prison Pagoda trembled slightly. It was very fearful. Zhang Wenxiu looked at the World Prison Pagoda. Do you know where teacher is? The World Prison Pagoda shook its head. Zhang Wenxiu narrowed her eyes. As far as I know, when teacher disappeared, you were with him. The World Prison Pagoda trembled slightly as if expressing something. Zhang Wenxiu still wanted to say something but Lian Qian suddenly said, when teacher disappeared in the end it was very strange. Not to mention it, even we don't know. After a moment of silence, Zhang Wenxiu threw the World Prison Pagoda in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian kept the World Prison Pagoda and looked at Zhang Wenxiu. Don't you want to open teacher's study room with this pagoda? Zhang Wenxiu said calmly, teacher isn't in the study room. Why would we open it? Saying this, she looked at Yi Xian. Do you think I'm like the others who covet teacher's treasures? If I had such thoughts, would this stupid pagoda have been able to escape? Hearing this, Yi Xian suddenly understood. He understood why Zhang Wenxiu had such a bad attitude towards the people from the Worldwide Academy. This woman must be very disgusted with the people from the Worldwide Academy coveting the Prophet's treasures. At this moment, Zhang Wenxiu suddenly said, who are you taking me to? Yi Xian said, we'll be there soon. Zhang Wenxiu glanced at Yi Xian. Let's make a bet. Let's bet whether you'll die today or not. Yi Xian did not hesitate. Bet that I won't die. What a joke. Of course he would bet that he wouldn't die. Zhang Wenxiu shrugged. Looks like I can only bet that you'll die. Yi Xian smiled. What's the bet? Zhang Wenxiu said, tell me. Yi Xian said in a light voice, if I don't die today, then you're not allowed to make a move against me or the Talisman sect for a year. Not only that, you have to make a move against me twice. Zhang Wenxiu looked at Yi Xian. What if you die? Yi Xian said, if I die, I'll pay the price with my life. Isn't that enough? Zhang Wenxiu shook his head. How thick-skinned? Yi Xian said, don't think that you're at a disadvantage. You're definitely stronger than me, aren't you? Zhang Wenxiu said calmly, all right, I promise you. Yi Xian looked at Zhang Wenxiu. Can I trust you? Zhang Wenxiu asked in return, what do you think? Yi Xian nodded. I trust you. Zhang Wenxiu looked at Yi Xian. Why? Yi Xian said, because you're the Prophet's disciple. As far as I know, the Prophet hates it when the strong use their strength to bully the weak. You won't do something he hates. Zhang Wenxiu looked at Yi Xian and did not say anything. Yi Xian said again, to be honest, I don't trust you. I trust the Prophet. Because I trust his foresight. Zhang Wenxiu shook his head and smiled. You want to play these little tricks with me? But as you wish, I really won't do anything he dislikes. If you don't die today, I won't kill you for a year and I won't attack Fu Wenzong. I can still attack you twice. Of course, that's on the condition that you don't die. Yi Xian nodded. All right. With that, he quickened his pace. At this moment, Lian Qian's voice suddenly sounded in Yi Xian's mind. Are you going to look for the plain-dressed woman? She knew that among the people Yi Xian knew, only the plain-dressed woman could suppress Zhang Wenxiu. Yi Xian shook his head. The plain-dressed woman? He did not know where she was. The plain-dressed woman's whereabouts were a mystery. Yi Xian did not think too much about it and quickened his pace. As for Zhang Wenxiu, the corners of his lips curled up and a playful smile appeared on his face. About an hour later, Yi Xian brought Zhang Wenxiu to a piece of barren land. When they arrived, Lian Qian knew who Yi Xian was looking for. Zhang Wenxiu narrowed his eyes. Yi Xian looked into the distance. At the end of his vision he could see a pitch-black door. Behind the door there was an eerie aura. Azura hell. This time, the person he was looking for was none other than Yi Ling. In fact, he had wanted to look for Yi Ling for a long time, but he did not have the chance. Now he had no choice but to look for her. He did not want to seek protection from Yi Ling, but he wanted to see if Yi Ling was still his sister. If she was not, then it was not a bad thing to end his life here. Of course he still wanted to see her. Yi Ling. Scenes of the past appeared in Yi Xian's mind. At this time Zhang Wenxiu suddenly smiled and said, Azura hell. As she said this, she looked at Yi Xian. Don't tell me that the helper you found is this Azura Empress. Yi Xian looked into the distance and remained silent. Zhang Wenxiu smiled and said, As far as I know, this Azura Empress is an extremely heartless person. Why do you want her to help you? Yi Xian shook his head. No, I just wanted to come here and take a look. Zhang Wenxiu smiled. What do you want to see? To see the Azura Empress? Yi Xian nodded. I want to see her. As he said this, he looked at the door in the distance. In fact, he was at a loss. Was Yi Ling still the same Yi Ling? He was not sure. This was because the Yi Ling he saw in the four-dimensional universe was too strong. He was so strong that he felt unfamiliar. He did not know if Yi Ling was still the same Yi Ling. If it was not, he had never thought about this question before, but now he did. If he wasn't, then everything would be meaningless. His main purpose in coming to the five-dimensional universe was to find Yi Ling. At this time Zhang Wenxiu suddenly smiled and said, You are not an idiot. You must have a reason for coming here. I am curious why you think this Azura Empress will help you. Yi Xian did not speak, he just looked into the distance. Zhang Wenxiu also looked into the distance. There was no movement inside the door. Zhang Wenxiu smiled and said, I will give you 15 minutes. Yi Xian was silent. 15 minutes passed in the blink of an eye. When the time was up, Zhang Wenxiu suddenly smiled and said, It seems that our Azura Empress will not come out. As she said this, she looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian said softly, Do it? After saying this, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. He knew that Yi Ling must know that he was here, but she did not appear. This explained everything. He was not going to force anything. Zhang Wenxiu looked at the door in the distance. She shook her head and smiled. Then she looked at Yi Xian, who was very close to her, and said, It seems that you have lost this bet. Go. As she said this, she suddenly raised her right hand and a powerful force suddenly enveloped Yi Xian. However, at this time, a voice suddenly came from the side, Try and touch him. Chapter 897. Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes when he heard this voice, and he looked towards the distance. A young girl was walking over slowly from there. It was none other than Yi Ling. There were two old men behind Yi Ling who were like ghosts. At this moment Yi Ling wore a dark black dress and was barefoot. Her feet were floating in the air, and she emanated a ghastly aura. The Azura Empress. The last emperor in the world. The smile on Zhang Wenxiu's face gradually vanished as she gazed at Yi Ling. There were countless emperors in the world all those years ago. However, all of them instantly dimmed in comparison when the Azura Empress appeared. Moreover, no one dared to call themselves an emperor after her. Even she, Zhang Wenxiu, wasn't able to become an emperor during that era. Because the world didn't acknowledge it. If one wanted to become an emperor, then one had to fight the Azura Empress first. Zhang Wenxiu glanced at Yi Xian. At this moment she was quite curious. She was curious about the relationship between Yi Xian and the Azura Empress. Meanwhile, Yi Ling walked over to Zhang Wenxiu and looked Zhang Wenxiu in the eyes. Fuck off. Fuck off. As soon as these words were spoken, the atmosphere in the surroundings instantly became tense. Zhang Wenxiu roared with laughter. She opened her right hand, and a bolt of lightning suddenly descended from the sky. In the next moment, the bolt of lightning fell into her hand. It was a lightning spear condensed from lightning. Zhang Wenxiu gazed at Yi Ling and roared with laughter, "Come, allow me, Zhang Wenxiu, to experience the strength of the Azura Empress." As soon as she finished speaking, she stabbed the lightning spear forward. As soon as the spear was stabbed forward, the space in an area of over 100 kilometers was suddenly filled with lightning. The lightning territory. At this moment Yi Xian was horrified, because he noticed that the lightning around him was madly destroying him. Yi Xian hurriedly activated the sword territory. He instantly felt much better once it appeared, but it still wasn't good. The lightning didn't take the initiative to attack him, but the aftershock from it was difficult for him to resist. So powerful. At this moment he finally realized how terrifying this woman's power was. This was not something that Lu Shidi and Lin Xiaoshu could compare to. The difference was too great. As if he'd thought of something, Yi Xian hurriedly gazed at Yi Ling. A lightning spear was stabbing towards Yi Ling. Moreover, the lightning in an area of over 100 kilometers had converged madly towards Yi Ling as well. This spear could really be said to be earth-shattering. In front of Zhang Wenxiu, Yi Ling was expressionless. When the lightning spear was half a zhang away from her, she suddenly opened her right hand and clenched it tightly. All things returned to silence. As her voice fell, a blood-red sickle suddenly flew out from her palm. Between heaven and earth, something was being torn apart. In the next moment, Yi Xian watched with astonishment as the lightning started to shatter apart layer by layer. In less than a breath of time, the lightning domain had collapsed, and the lightning spear in Zhang Wenxiu's hand had started to shatter inch by inch. Suddenly, Zhang Wenxiu roared with laughter, "Everything returns to silence. Come, take another spear strike from me." As soon as she finished speaking, she'd arrived in midair, and she looked down at Yi Ling from there. A spear had suddenly appeared in her grasp, and she grinned as she lightly swept it towards Yi Ling. Sky split. The spear flew out from Zhang Wenxiu's grasp. Everywhere it passed, the entire sky split apart. When looked at from afar, it seemed like a rift had been torn open in this expanse of the heavens and the earth. It was an extremely shocking sight. Moreover, a spear carried destructive force as it swept down from within that rift, and its target was Yi Ling. Yi Xian's expression instantly changed violently when he saw this force, and he practically instinctively flashed over to stand in front of Yi Ling. He stared fixedly at the spear, and at this moment, his expression was unprecedentedly solemn. This spear strike was truly very formidable. Even if he utilized the energy of his bloodline, he wouldn't be able to resist it. Yi Ling gazed silently at Yi Xian while standing behind Yi Xian. What's this fellow doing? On the other hand, the two old men behind her were hesitant to speak, and they gazed at Yi Xian. What's this fellow doing? Right at this moment, Yi Ling suddenly patted Yi Xian on the shoulder and spoke softly, "Allow me." Yi Xian was stunned when he heard Yi Ling, and then he gazed at Yi Ling. Yi Ling nodded, "Allow me." Yi Xian grinned. "All right." As he spoke, he retreated behind Yi Ling. Yi Ling looked at the spear that had already arrived above her head, and her expression was very calm. She opened her palm, and the blood-red scythe in her hand suddenly flew out, and the scythe silently slashed at the spear. A subtle tearing sound was suddenly heard, and immediately after, the spear in Zhang Wenxiu's hand split into two. The scythe's speed did not decrease, and it soared into the sky, slashing straight at Zhang Wenxiu. In the air, Zhang Wenxiu grinned. "Interesting, haha." As soon as she finished speaking, she slowly closed her eyes, and in an instant, the blood-red scythe below her slowed down. Below, Yi Ling's expression was calm, but the expressions of the two old men behind her changed drastically. One of the old men said in a deep voice, "Spear Soul Dimension. This woman is so powerful." Yi Xian looked at the old man who spoke and asked, "Senior, what is the Spear Soul Dimension?" The old man glanced at Yi Xian and then said, "It's that woman's spear has already surpassed this dimension, and she's not in this dimension either." Yi Xian asked again, "She's already surpassed the fifth dimension? In the sixth dimension?" The old man's mouth twitched and he did not say anything else. Yi Xian was speechless. At this moment, Lian Chen's voice suddenly sounded, "The dimension he mentioned is actually space. Space has thickness, and not only does it have thickness, there are also dimensions. The five-dimensional universe refers to the 5 dimensions of space here, and Zhang Wenxiu has already entered the second dimension. She attacked Yi Ling in the second dimension, so the speed of Yi Ling's scythe has slowed down. This is because this is suppression, dimensional suppression. And people in the second dimension have absolute suppression over people in the first dimension. Not only can Zhang Wenxiu enter the second dimension, but she can also fuse her spear Dao with it, so it can be said that this is very impressive. Yi Xian nodded, and as if thinking of something he asked again, how can I enter the second dimension? Lian Qian said, there's no shortcut, you can only break it with force and you need to have a deep understanding of space. You can't do without either. Yi Xian asked again, which dimension does the plain-dressed woman belong to? Lian Qian suddenly said angrily, shut up. You talker. Yi Xian was speechless. At this moment, the space in the distance suddenly trembled and Yi Xian quickly looked up. The space had become illusory, and the blood-red scythe had completely stopped. Yi Xian quickly looked at Yi Ling, and the space around Yi Ling was in a strange illusory state. Obviously, Zhang Wenxiu was suppressing her in the second dimension. Yi Xian was a little worried. At this moment, Yi Ling suddenly opened her palm, and the blood-red scythe in the sky suddenly appeared in her hand. She held the scythe and lightly slashed it in front of her. There was a soft tearing sound, and it was this slash that suddenly restored the space to normal, and in the sky, a bloody scar suddenly appeared on Zhang Wenxiu's face. In the sky, Zhang Wenxiu touched her face lightly and she looked down at Yu Lai. As expected of the last empress of the human world, I'm convinced. As she said that, she looked at Yi Xian. You win. With that, she turned and disappeared at the end of the horizon. Yi Xian hesitated and then asked, Linger, how did you win? Linger? The two old men behind Yi Ling had extremely strange expressions, and one of them was about to speak, but was stopped by the other. Yi Ling looked at Yi Xian and she just looked at Yi Xian without saying a word. Yi Xian said, You're still Linger, right? Yi Ling still remained silent. Yi Xian opened his palm, and a little wooden figure appeared in his hand. This little wooden figure looked exactly like Yi Ling. Yi Ling suddenly said, Stand down. The two old men behind her silently retreated to the side. Yi Ling said, Come with me. With that, she turned and walked towards the distance. Yi Xian hurriedly followed her, and in next to no time, the two of them passed through the door and entered the Azura Hell. As soon as they entered the Azura Hell, a ghastly aura assaulted their faces, and Yi Xian couldn't help but shiver. It was very ghastly. This place was the most ghastly place he had ever seen. Yi Ling led Yi Xian deeper into the Azura Hell. Along the way, Yi Xian discovered that there were experts in black armor standing all around. These people's auras were extremely powerful, much more powerful than the experts in the Worldwide Academy. When these people saw Yi Ling, they all knelt on one knee. On the way, Lian Qian suddenly said, She's really strong. Yi Xian hurriedly asked, Why do you say so? Lian Qian said in a deep voice, When she fought with Zhang Wenxiu, she didn't enter the second dimension, but used the first dimension to break Zhang Wenxiu's second dimension. This kind of strength is very terrifying, worthy of being the strongest great emperor in the fifth dimension. Yi Xian grinned. He was really happy that Yi Ling was strong, but he still felt a little disappointed. This was because Yi Ling didn't need his protection anymore. At this time, Lian Qian said, Your sister's strength is probably enough to enter the third dimension. If that's true, then it's too heaven-defying. Yi Xian looked at Yi Ling, Can you enter the third dimension? Yi Ling nodded slightly. Yes. Yi Xian was about to speak, but Yi Ling suddenly said softly, Why did you come to the fifth dimension? Yi Xian said, To look for you. Yi Ling stopped and looked at Yi Xian. And then? Yi Xian walked in front of Yi Ling and looked at Yi Ling. You're my sister, and I'm your brother. Yi Ling said softly, What you care about is the old Yi Ling. Yi Xian suddenly grabbed Yi Ling's hand. Yi Ling didn't resist, but the guards around them looked at Yi Xian with unkind expressions. However, seeing that Yi Ling didn't resist, they didn't dare to say anything. Yi Xian looked at Yi Ling in front of him and said softly, Are you not the old Yi Ling? Or have you forgotten everything in the past? Yi Ling looked at Yi Xian. Do you know who I am? Yi Xian smiled. You're my sister. Yi Ling looked at Yi Xian for a long time. All of a sudden, scenes of the past flashed across her mind. Gradually, tears welled up in her eyes. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.